Something good about Asheville is that it's a community of people who are just so warm and so generous. And it's been so evident now, especially after a storm, to see how people are showing up for each other. Hi, I'm Shelly Tygielski, and you're entering A World's Gone Good.
Well, hello, my name's Steve, and this is the place where we highlight everyday people making good happen each and every day. Welcome to World Gone Good. Today we begin by me admitting to you, good person you, that today's show was not scheduled for, well, today. We had a whole other show for you all ready to go. And don't worry, you're going to still get that one coming up. But I felt like we needed to talk about something. Oh boy, it's time for a talk. Oh God. Don't worry. It's a good talk. And it started off, take a listen to this.
My mother used to say a long time ago, whenever there would be any really catastrophe that was in the movies or on the air, she would say, always look for the helpers. There will always be helpers, even just on the sidelines. That's why I think that if news programs could make a conscious effort of showing rescue teams, of showing who medical people, anybody who is coming into a place where there's a tragedy, to be sure that they include that. Because if you look for the helpers, you'll know that there's hope.
What you just heard was Mr. Fred Rogers talking about how to handle the unknown, how to handle uncertainty, and how to handle the bad stuff that happens. Before we go any further in our talk, I want you to ask yourself this question. Am I a helper? Not me, you. Okay, let's try that again. I want you to ask this question. Okay, ready? Here we go. I'm going to ask you again. It's not about me, it's about you. Am I a helper? It's a question our good guest today knows the answer to herself. And not just a mantra for her, it's her chosen life mission to help others, to connect others, to create community. Remember when Ferris Bueller taught us this?
I said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
I share that quote because life is moving fast, way faster than our human brains have ever been asked before to absorb, compute, feel, and especially process. And that's never been more true than when it comes to the things which are completely out of our control, like back-to-back hurricanes Helene and Milton decimating our southern east coast of the United States. Shelly Tygielski is a twice-published author and founder and co-founder of two organizations that help people when they are in greatest need. She is the definition of good Samaritan. And she just happens to live in Asheville, North Carolina, which bore the brunt of Hurricane Helene. Now, don't worry, this is not a sad downer episode. In fact, it's one of the most inspiring ones we've ever offered. While you listen to today's episode, I'd like you to think about two things as part of that talk I told you. One, what would you do if this happened to your community? And two, what can you do right now for the people living in these communities in need? Communities like Asheville. Remember what Mr. Rogers said about looking for the helpers? You are the helper. I am the helper. We all are the helpers. Here comes Shelly Tygielski to share her good story. Today we have a very interesting guest, a very connected guest, a first for us. We actually have a CNN hero with us, which is very impressive. Shelly, I'm going to start here and ask you this question because I want to get right into it. Where are you from?
Wow, that's actually probably the most complicated question that you could ask me. um, I'm from parts unknown. I've been a nomad for the last 4 years. I grew up in South Florida, in Miami, and 4 years ago, my husband and I sold our house, and our son, who is an only child, went to college in California, and we decided to become nomads. And we now live half the year in Asheville, North Carolina, and the other half of the year in North Lake Tahoe, California.
Do you love the nomad life?
Yeah, it's fun. We've had an opportunity to live in places like Portugal and the island of Grenada in the West Indies, and just all over the country. And it's been really fun to become a resident of a place and see a place not as a tourist, but as somebody who lives somewhere, and to really be able to evaluate, like, can I live here? So that's been really exciting, to just have new experiences. Because I think a lot of us, when you get to middle age or older, you sort of plateau or settle into a way of life that can be really comfortable, and it becomes more challenging to sort of push up against those edges and cultivate new experiences and keep curiosity alive and keep adventure alive. And so I'm really grateful that I have a partner who's willing to do that with me.
Now, you have a very impressive background yourself because you entered the corporate world. You had some success in the corporate world, but something happened where what was the change for you?
I don't necessarily think that I was ever meant to be in the corporate world. Now, reflecting back, I can see that a lot of the tools that I employ in my work as a Good Samaritan um, were gained and honed and sharpened as skills in the corporate world. But when I went to school and when I went to get my master's degree, my kind of intention at the time when I graduated, I thought I was going to go work for like a UN agency or an NGO, or go work for a large organization that was helping people. I came out of a really great school, so I got a six-figure offer at the time to go work for a big five consulting firm. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll just do this for a couple of years and then I'll go do the thing I'm supposed to be doing. And, I think we've all at some point in our life, like, fallen into that trap where a couple of years becomes, again, a way of life, and you're suddenly comfortable, and now you have obligations, and you suddenly have a mortgage, and you find yourself with like kids and a dog, and, you're married, and you're like, it's like the Talking Head song, right? You're like, how did I get here? Right? You just like wake up one day. And so really, like I always say, in spite of myself, I succeeded and climbed the corporate ladder and was really good at what I did. And, you kind of look around, you're sitting in the corner office and you realize I have everything I should ever want, right? I have a pedigree, I have awards, I'm sitting on boards, I have really incredible community and friends and peers, and I should feel really happy. I should feel fulfilled. I should feel really successful and all of the things, right? Proud. And actually, it was the most miserable I ever was in my entire life.
It's amazing. It's so
Yeah.
amazing. And did you really quickly, did you realize it in that moment, or was it something it took you a little bit of time to look back on and go, "Oh, that's what wasn't working."
Oh, no, no, no. Like the first year that I was in that position was okay. I mean, it was very stressful, but it was just a really fast pace. I was traveling so much. I just felt like I couldn't be present for anyone. And I felt like the one thing that was sustaining me, which was my connection to community and to, family and friends, and just to have time for myself even, right? Like, was just diminished greatly. And so I always just felt like I was like on the go and never had like a moment to catch up or catch my breath. As I got into year 2 and then as year 3 progressed, I really started just having panic attacks while I was driving to work, like full on anxiety attacks, panic attacks where you feel like you're having a heart attack. And in fact, at one point, I actually called my husband from the car while I was on I-95 driving to work and told him, I think I'm having a heart attack. And he said, you have to pull over. And I pulled over and I just, you know, wound up just having to kind of talk myself off the edge, realizing that actually I wasn't having a heart attack. I was having a panic attack. And I just knew that something was completely like misaligned and wrong, and that I needed to do something about it. But, as a person who was really responsible for many people in my family, aging parents, a kid that's about to go to college, like all of these kind of what ifs that you find yourself, holding, and your arms don't feel wide enough or big enough to do it. And then suddenly you feel like, well, I can't make these decisions because I no longer have autonomy to do that. But I was really fortunate because I have, a great partner in life who, and my son actually, from the mouth of babes, I think he was probably like 14, maybe 15 at the time. And he said, Mom, what the happiest day in my life is going to be? And I honestly thought he was going to say something like, when I get the hell out of this house. And I said, what, Liam? And he said, I'd be so happy if you just finally quit your job.
Yeah.
Because you need to start taking your own advice. And I just was like, here's this kid who's watching me from the outside. And I think that I'm doing him like favors by staying in this job so that I could pay for his school and pay for this and pay for that. And ultimately, like, that's not what his priority is and what he, puts at the center of things. And so that really kind of, for me, was the pivotal moment. And it wasn't just like one moment, but it was just an accumulation of, many moments that led me to the decision to create a game plan to resign within 6 months. And I picked like a date, and I basically, told a few people who I was like, you got to hold me accountable to this. I actually sat down and wrote a resignation letter so that I had it and it was tangible and real. And then I had to hold myself accountable and I had to start creating a plan. It wasn't like I just walked in and I was, it wasn't like a Jerry Maguire moment where I wrote a manifesto and I was like, I quit. It was like, no, I have a fiduciary responsibility to people and to this company and to my family. And I need to kind of like do things in the right way. And I can do it in a way that, can take 6 months or so. And I wound up actually resigning before the date of that letter that I wrote. I wound up training the person after me to take over.
You're speaking to so many people who listen to our show who feel that stuck thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a normal thing to feel because, look, we all have to pay rent or mortgage. We all have to put food on the table. We all have to put gas in the car. I was 25 years old, 26 years old. Like you, I was having migraines. I was having stomach pains. I was having these panic attacks. I was driving to the building. I was working for a production company through Warner Brothers. And I look up at that damn building and one word flies into my mind. And the word was quit. And I walked in that morning. You did better than I did because I went and just gave the 2 weeks notice. I had $300 in a savings account. But I also knew I was absolutely miserable. Absolutely miserable. But you went on now to follow your dream, which was always your path, and create something to help others. But you did it in You didn't do it just once, my friend. You've done it a few different ways. So take us through, what was the first organization that you created?
Well, the first, I mean, it wasn't an organization, sort of the backstory to this final year where I was in the corporate world was as I was recognizing that I needed more time and wanted to build community, I really turned back towards a practice that I had really honed and learned in such a deep and beautiful way with my my wisdom teachers when I was in graduate school, so in the late 90s. And I decided to just start meditating solo on the beach. And this was in South Florida and in Hollywood Beach, if anybody listening is familiar with Hollywood Beach. I decided to, in an effort to create community, invite a few friends, created like a Facebook post of, and the first time that I invited people, about 12 of my friends showed up. And then week after week, we decided to continue meeting. They would bring friends, who would bring friends, who would bring friends, and so on. And eventually we wound up with 100 people, and then 300 people, and then 500 people, and then 800 people. And it just became this massive movement. But at the same time, I was doing this on Sunday mornings and I was still working full time. And so it was like on Sunday mornings, I was like this person giving a Dharma talk in front of a lot of people and talking about the meaning of life and purpose and being mission aligned and speaking about all these things that I wasn't at that time really following myself, right? But it was almost as if I was giving a talk to myself. People would come up to me after and say oh, can you come to my law firm, or can you come to my school and talk to my students, or, and I just kept turning people down thinking don't they understand that this is not my job? I have a real job. This isn't my job. I just do this on Sundays, for fun. And it just became really clearer to me as the weeks went by that the universe was really trying to tell me something. And I really just needed to lean into that and just trust that, even though, I'm a planner. I like to have a game plan and say okay, this is the plan. This is what I'm going to be doing. When I quit, I have this other thing lined up, or I have a whole business plan and I'm going to start making money this way, or how am I going to monetize this community? And I actually, for the first time, it probably in my life, honestly, just was ready to be in a free fall. And it was scary, very scary. There were moments where I was like, what have I done? I did feel like there was a big, sheathing of identity. For so long, my identity was wrapped up in my title. So that's usually the first thing. When you meet people, they're like, what do you do? And you could say, I'm the president of this company, or I'm the whatever, and to be able to just say well, I'm a meditation teacher, but I used to be blah, 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 blah. I used to qualify who I am. Really, I'm not this kooky person who doesn't,
Right.
and so, and I just stopped doing that. After a while, people would ask me what do you do? And I'd be like, well, let's talk about what do you want to do?
Yeah, and what makes you happy? Because it's so ingrained in our society, especially as Americans, of I have to tell you what I do to validate myself, to move forward from any imposter syndrome I might have, and also to let you know that I am important.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
Totally. And I mean, it goes back to, and I write about this in my book, actually, the central question of when we're young, and I just, remember being asked this, and I remember my son being asked this, and I'm sure you remember being asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Hey, Steve, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that's not the central question that we need to be asking kids and even ourselves, as adults. It's not what do you want to be or what do you want to do? It's who do you want to be? Who do you want to be when you grow up? And so when I started to kind of create this shift for myself and ask myself that question, it was okay, I know that I've always wanted to be a person that is helpful. I've always wanted to be a person that is kind and showing up for people and reliable. And a helper, and all of these kind of principles and tenets and morals and all of these abstract words.
Where'd that come from for you? Your parents?
It was an amalgamation of a lot of things. Like, I definitely think as kids it was ingrained in us that like community service is incredibly important. I grew up in a deeply Jewish household, and in Hebrew we say tikkun olam, which is repairing the world. And so my parents always like were volunteering and doing things for the community and showing up for people like, who were sitting Shiva or like were sick or needed extra care. And like they were just, really being helpful in a form of mutual aid, actually. I learned that at home, but I also learned very early on when I was in junior high school through like a really special friendship, a person that I'm still friends with today, a woman named Jennifer, who really taught me the value of activism and the value of being able to show up in a different way, in an organized way, and to organize other people around a cause.
It's really amazing everything you're talking about because we have so much in common. First of all, I'm Jewish too. And I had 2 bar mitzvahs because the first one got canceled because of a snowstorm, but they still made me do it. The the other thing too is when I was a little kid and people asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I always said the same thing. I used to say, I don't know, but I'm going to move to Los Angeles. That's what I used to say. And I have no idea why. I was fascinated by television. I was fascinated by movies. I was fascinated by stories. And I did. That's what I did. And anyone who knows me knows I got to Los Angeles with no friggin' clue what I was going to do and spent about 9 years trying to figure that out. So there is something very powerful when you honor that part of yourself, and allow yourself. And it's everything you're talking about, because we talk about this on the show all the time. We have all these amazing entrepreneurs who come on here, and it's the same thing as like so many of my listeners, so many of my friends tell me who listen. Yeah, I know, but I can't open a farm, sanctuary for cows. I have to put my kid through college. And it's like, well, so did the person who opened the cow farm sanctuary. And they, right? It's like, we can all do when we get in that mind mentality that it is possible.
Yeah, I think anything is possible. I just think that also we live in a culture where we want things to happen right away, and we're so used to instant gratification.
Sure.
So I do think that, there's a value in also like understanding that you can have that cow sanctuary, but you may not have it today, or you may need to like have 2 things going on at the same time to sort of build towards this other thing. There's a lot of creative ways, and there's a lot of people I know who, want to be musicians or they want to be artists, and they can't afford to do that full time in the world that they're living in with the obligations that they have, but they eventually get to that point.
Right. And it's what you said, is you can go volunteer at the cow sanctuary that already is in existence, and you can learn all the things you want to learn from it. And that may be more than enough to fulfill that side of you. And that's fantastic.
Yep.
You have an organization called Pandemic of Love. When did you start this organization?
I started this organization around my kitchen table when I was still living in South Florida, a few days after the pandemic started and right before Florida went into lockdown. And I really actually started it just for my community of meditators, on the beach, people that I knew were already struggling or working paycheck to paycheck, or were in the hospitality industry and relying on tips and hourly wages to make a living. And I thought about all of those people at that time and their vulnerabilities. And I realized people like myself whose lives wouldn't materially change as much. There were people who have and people who need. And I realized at a time of disconnection when we weren't allowed to, if you recall, in those really early days of the pandemic, like there was just so much ambiguity, to connect people directly. So if somebody needed a phone bill paid or a laptop computer for their kid or a hotspot or whatever it is, groceries delivered because they were immunocompromised. And so I started just two really simple forms, give help and get help, on Google Forms. And I started to match people in that way. And I created a post on social media on my Instagram account, which was like 40 seconds long. And in it, I used the words pandemic of love. I said, like, let's start a pandemic of love. And that just caught on, and I didn't think anything of it other than, hey, this is to help my community. But that post wound up going around the world and back. And in 24 hours, I suddenly had people from Italy and Portugal and the UK and South America and Central America, like reaching out to me all over the country here saying, this is so brilliant. Like, how do we do the same thing? Can you teach us? Can you make these forms for us? Can you help us figure this out for our communities? And I realized, like, all of this training now in supply chain and SQL servers and operations and, just like everything that I learned in the corporate world, I was able to really put into building a system and standard operating procedures for Pandemic of Love and to scale it fairly quickly and be able to train people to do this in their own communities and help themselves once they realized that nobody was coming to help them.
I just love that it started that way. And I have to ask you, did you have a moment of like, at all, of, I don't know, you guys, I'm doing this like you are? Or were you just like, yes, let's do this, we're diving in? Or was it a mixture of both?
It's always both. Like, I'm by nature like a skeptic and a self-deprecating person. And I always tell people, even people who have come to me and said like, oh, can you be my life coach? Can I hire you one-on-one to like, give me advice or spend time? And I'm like, no, that's crazy. Like, I haven't figured out my own life.
Right,
like, why would you
right.
pay me? Why
Right.
would you pay me to like be your friend? Like, we could just go for coffee and I'll give you advice. Like,
Right, you're like, come look in my closet. You
yeah,
can see
like,
who
I'm
right?
not qualified to be a life coach. Like,
Right.
what are you talking
I
about?
can't even organize the sheets and the towels and
Yeah, I
I
mean,
know.
I don't know exactly. So I'm always like that. And then but I'm also the type of person that like works really hard and like is very diligent and persistent and cares a lot. I think the secret sauce for me and sort of like what is the common thread between both what happened on the beach and what happened with Pandemic of Love and what happened with a different organization that right after the election in 2016, had a little bit of like momentum in South Florida that I started. All of these things that like I'm working on now, to Partners in Kind, which is a production company and purpose and production fund that my partner Jillian Hormel and I started a year and a half ago. Like all of those things have to do with like showing up, like noticing that there's a gap or a problem systemically, and rather than just wondering why things are or trying to plug a hole in the dam, like trying to figure out a way to just like be disruptive, and not in a way that's like, we're going to blow this up and like redo this thing, but rather coming from a place of love always, and coming from a place of kindness, and coming from a place where we define success. I always say, like, I lived by ROI, meaning return on investment. And now my definition for ROI is ripples of impact. And that's how I define success, and some of those ripples, you never even know how far reaching they are in terms of what you may have started by throwing a pebble in a pond, but I know that there are ripples that are out there that I may have started 4 years ago. Somebody's okay right now because of that, and they're paying it forward, because I know people have done that for me my entire life.
Let's talk about Asheville. Right now, we're all focused on good old Hurricane Milton. But something happened before Hurricane Milton that also friggin' sucked, called Hurricane Helene. Helene?
Yeah. Helene.
Okay, we'll go with that. I don't like anyone with those names anymore. I'm just kidding. Where were you when the hurricane hit?
I was in the mountains, 2,700 elevation in Asheville, North Carolina, which is in western North Carolina. For those who have never been there, if you're a West Coaster, I would liken it to a Santa Cruz or Eugene, Oregon. It's a very like liberal, hippie, artsy community of about 100,000 people that is just really unique. It's a place that my mother-in-law has lived in for over 20 years. My brother-in-law has lived there for close to 30 years. And we decided to move there a year ago in September of 2023. And so it's funny because I come from South Florida. So I've lived through hurricanes. I've lived through Hurricane Andrew and through every hurricane before and after that as well. So I'm no stranger to hurricanes. And I honestly, moving to Asheville was like such a relief because I thought to myself, like, okay, I'm moving to a place that is being sold as a climate haven, a place where there's no earthquakes, there's no tornadoes, there's no snowstorms. There can be flash flooding, but we're like, we're not that close enough to the river where that would make a difference per se. We're in higher elevation. And so, when the hurricane was supposed to come and cover over Asheville, in all honesty, like even as a former Floridian, like nobody told us to prepare for it. Like maybe like few hours before we started getting alerts on our phones that there were flash flood warnings. But normally when I would prepare for a hurricane, I'd have provisions. I'd go to the supermarket. I'd get water. I'd fill up my bathtub. There's like all of these things that you do. You get batteries, flashlights, candles, etc. Because you just make the assumption that you're going to lose power for a few days or more. You fill up your car so you have gas in the car. We did none of those things, and we weren't alone. Most people did not do any of those things. I would say like the vast majority of Ashevilleans did not do those things because we weren't put on notice to do those things.
And also because it was not something that was even in the realm of possibility to hit the way it hit.
That's right. We were told that this flood is being likened to what happened back in 1915, so over 100 years ago in Asheville, when it was much less densely populated. But actually, this particular flood and this particular sort of alignment of circumstances, this perfect storm, if you will, was like of biblical proportions. And we are being told that it's like a 1 in 1,000 year event.
Right.
I was sitting at home and it was raining, and we live on high ground in West Asheville, so not far from the River Arts District, which we can normally walk to, which is now decimated. I mean, most of it is gone, actually. Like it doesn't exist anymore. We went to bed that night and we still had power, and I woke up at 6 a.m. and there was no power and obviously no Wi-Fi, therefore. My phone was on SOS, so I had no cell service. I had no signal whatsoever. At that time, we had water, but the water pressure was like really low. And I didn't even really think anything of it. Like I didn't correlate all of these things. So my husband and I, just stayed at home and looked outside, and it was raining. But then eventually by like 3 or 4 o'clock the next day, the rain had passed, and believe it or not, the sun came out, and we decided to go for a walk in our neighborhood. And lo and behold, we took the first turn out of our neighborhood, and we saw a giant tree that probably was 80-foot trees, 100-foot trees, like falling on a house and slicing it like butter. And trees that were, that fell on cars, and massive amounts of flooding, especially in the lower areas. There's a creek behind my house that looked like whitewater rapids were like running through the back of my neighborhood. And it was scary. And it was then that I realized like, oh, we're not getting power anytime soon. We're not getting cell signal anytime soon because it's very evident that the towers were likely taken down, like cell towers. It was only like 48 hours later that we really started to understand the extent of, just through honestly word of mouth and like the few people in our neighborhood who had Verizon, which for some reason was the only cell tower that stayed up. And finally, by like day 3, Verizon was kind enough to open up the cell tower to everybody, regardless of like what, from an emergency perspective. And so I have AT&T, and I was like using Verizon to make calls and just let people know like, hey, I'm alive, like including my son who, couldn't reach us for 3 days, and calling my mother-in-law who's 88 and, seeing if my brother is okay and my brother-in-law. And so it was really scary to realize what was happening and to realize the catastrophic nature of entire communities. Like, for example, my hairdresser, Melanie, who owns Cosmos Salon in downtown Asheville, is a resident of Swannanoa, and Swannanoa is 90% gone. Like whole entire homes. There's a picture that somebody took from their home that was on higher ground of like 4 or 5 roofs and water basically reaching the rooftops and people sitting on top of those roofs. Entire roads were washed away. We had no way out of Asheville because like in California when there's mudslides, or in Big Sur when an entire chunk of like road falls into the ocean, that's basically what happened here. In major interstates, I-40, I-26, etc., were just completely washed away. People couldn't get in, we couldn't get out. There was no power, so you couldn't get gasoline. So even if you had a generator, which not many people do, you couldn't get the gasoline to actually power that generator. Gas stations couldn't pump gas, ironically, even though they had gasoline, because they didn't have a generator. It was very scary, really, really scary to think about, wow, like we are so unprepared to live without technology and without comforts. And it really made me, on a broader scale, rethink my relationship to all of these things. I sit with you today and I have power now, got power back on day 14, and I got Wi-Fi back on day 15, and I have no running water. This is day 18 without running water, not just clean water, without any water, period. 80% of Asheville is in the same position, including nursing homes and schools and the hospital, Mission Hospital, which is the largest hospital in Buncombe County. And we are really in the thick of it, like surviving on a daily basis and, recognizing that we are so ill prepared for the realities of climate change. And we're not even, in many cases, willing to even have a conversation about climate change and the realities of it, because there's still so many people that, believe that it is not real.
Well, and also that it won't come for them.
Yeah.
Right? For anyone listening right now, how can they help people in Asheville right now through your organization?
I've been posting a lot of updates, and there's some posts on my Instagram, and my Instagram account is Mindful Skater Girl, as in skateboarding. So Mindful Skater Girl. And that's honestly the best kind of hub. People can go to pandemicoflove.com and just learn more about us and see all the media and stuff that we've gotten, and just so they could see like, hey, this is a real thing, But that's not the best way to, at this moment, help, because things are so critical right now, and the needs are just dire right here, right now. Because we're a global mutual aid organization, we have a Venmo and a Cash App set up, and both of those accounts are Pandemic of Love. We also have a PayPal account, which is pandemicoflove@gmail.com. Those are the three best ways, even if you have $1, you want to give up a cup of coffee during the week and donate. That money never goes into a bank account. It directly goes into the hands of people who live in Asheville that are just in need, have no income for the foreseeable future. For example, my hairdresser, Melanie, who can't do hair because she has no water, and you can't have a hair salon without washing people's hair and dealing, and having hygiene. She has no income for the foreseeable future until water comes back on, but she still has to pay rent, and she still has to pay, for her car and for her kids and health insurance and all the things. And so we've been providing grants directly to entire staff rosters for restaurants and bars and breweries, which Asheville is really well known for. And that's a really great way to help. Another way to help, if you need a tax deduction or, you're thinking about kind of the wider picture, is to go to an organization that I sit on the board of. If you go to globalempowermentmission.org, and if you go to the Hurricane Helene page specifically, because we have missions with GEM all over the world, from Ukraine to Gaza to Maui and so many other places where we've gone in to help and have never left. But what GEM is doing, other than providing distribution centers to get actual supplies, food, water, et cetera, to people in need on the ground here, is they partnered with the Carolina Panthers, and they've also partnered with the Horseshoe Farm to provide grants of $10,000 per business for small businesses that need immediate financial assistance to do cleanup or rehab or replace windows or, just kind of be able to get back up and running. And in some cases, that $10,000 surely won't be enough because the damage is so great. But in some cases, it actually is incredibly life-saving and allows for these businesses to fix what they need to fix, and whether it's a roof or what have you, and get and be able to order a porta potty and maybe get the show on the road. You know what I mean? And reopen again. And so those are the two ways that I personally am involved with and that I can vouch for. And I think that, one of the things that's been very frustrating for me, Steve, is that I feel like, and you mentioned this at the beginning when you're like, everyone's talking about Hurricane Milton. And it's like, yeah, they are, but also they won't be very soon because there's going to be the next thing. And there's also an election coming up. So that's, and there's a war overseas and there's all this other stuff that's happening. And like, I feel like people just never don't understand the extent of how bad things are here, and that we are living without water, and that we won't have water, we're being told now, for the foreseeable future. It could be a month, it could be 2 months. And I know that the city and everybody at the city is doing the best that they can, but it's the reality. And so I really hope that people listening to this understand that, we shouldn't be forgotten, and that it's a really special community, and it would be great to be able to pay it forward if somebody ever did anything kind to you in your life, to help a stranger, to make sure that people don't flee Asheville like they did New Orleans after Katrina, which is what I'm comparing this to. During Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans lost half of its population that never returned. They left, they evacuated, and they just basically started a life somewhere else. Asheville is a city of 100,000 people, not 1.5 million people. So if 50,000 people never come back, that's basically just, a nail in the coffin for a community like this, and it'll take decades for us to rebuild.
We close these shows with 2 questions. And I think this first one will be pretty easy for you in some way. It is this: who inspires you?
Who inspires me? Everyday people inspire me. I mean, obviously people that are like my son inspires me greatly. My son's friends who are like, vocal about what's happening in the world, in all cases. And they're, speaking up for those who can't speak up on behalf of themselves or for other sentient beings. I'm a person who really is inspired by everything on a daily basis, just given, the challenges that I have, which we didn't get into in this call, but, um, I am faced with blindness. I'm blind in my left eye, and it's a very long story, but I have a degenerative eye disease, and I'm inspired by everything I see every day, and just really small acts of kindness that people discount and think are meaningless or don't matter, because I know that the aggregate of those acts are really, really important and life-changing.
And we usually close the show with this, which is, I usually say, tell me something good, but I want you to do something really quick for me. Tell me something good about Asheville.
Something good about Asheville is that it's, out of all the communities that I've visited, not just as a nomad, but even prior to that, it's a community of people who are just so warm and so generous. And it's been so evident now, especially after a storm, to see how people are showing up for each other. Sometimes after storms or catastrophes occur, you're concerned about things like looting or, people doing bad things. And I have to tell you that I never for once had that kind of feeling in the city of Asheville. Like, it always feels safe and kind and loving. And it's just a place that has just really, really great vibes.
Thank you, Shelly, for being a helper and for inspiring us all to pitch in ourselves in whatever way we can. Let's go make some good, people. Next time on World Gone Good.
My visitors were lost in the system long before they passed on. They knew to come to me, a young person who was spiritually receptive, for a moment of entertainment before returning to the purgatory of institutional rigor, the discipline that they only knew to respond to in that state of in-between. It was possible that they sensed I would not see them as invisible children that they had already become when they were amongst the living.
Gather round the good storytelling campfire, for Halloween is upon us, and that means some good spooky times. I've invited some of my favorite people to share their tales of ghosties and goblins and all sorts of tricks and treats. If you're a non-believer, you may find your spirit reconsidering the possibilities. Don your costume and join us for next week's oh so good and oh so creepy episode. Until then, be good.